What's going on, everybody? Today I'm going to show you how to change the bearing in a washing machine. I actually got this for free. Somebody was throwing it away because they wound up getting a new one. They got quoted on changing the bearing and they said it'd be around $400. I'm not going to spend near that much. $400 you can buy a brand new washer, which is what they did. But we're not going to spend $400 because we're going to fix it ourselves. So let's get started.
Okay, every washer is probably a little bit different, but we're going to start with taking a screwdriver and moving this tab right here. So you push it in all the way as hard as you can, and then you pick up, and then it comes out, and then you can pick your lid up.
Now that we got the clips out, all you got to do is pick up the lid and be careful that this doesn't fall on your head. The two tabs are probably going to come off. You can go ahead and save them for later.
There are some plastic retaining clips all around the washing machine tub that hold this plastic cover on. If you put a flathead screwdriver beneath them and give it a turn, it should pop most of them off. After you get all of them taken off, there's one hose that will still hold this cover on in the back. If you take a pair of water pump pliers or needle nose pliers and just move the clamp back, you should be able to slide that hose right off.
The next thing you want to do is pop the cap off of your drum here. After you get your cap off, you just want to get a pair of pliers and yank this cover out of here. And then deep down in there, which you can't see, is a nut.
Okay, since I have no idea what's in this dark creepy hole, because I don't have my flashlight here, stupid of me, I'm going to pray to the gods and hope that this piece of junk gator grip socket fits whatever's down there. I'm also going to use one of the longest extensions I have. I'm using 3/8 drive. We're going to hope it works. We're just going to put it in here slowly till we feel it grabbing something, and when it grabs it, moves the whole thing. I'm going to use one hand to keep this thing from turning. Use my elbow and my other one to push down on it. I believe I just broke it free.
After the other piece is off, you can just grab this, pick it straight up, and now we're starting to get to the heart of things.
Digging through my bag for a number 2 Phillips bit, and I'm going to use my impact to take this coupling off. The coupling that you're about to see is what connects the washing machine tub to the drive motor. A lot of the time, if you can hear the motor running but you know your tub isn't turning, it's probably because the coupling that you see right now is stripped. It's just a piece of plastic. So after we get this coupling off, we should be able to remove the washing machine tub from the washing machine.
Now, you're ready to lift the drum out of here.
So that's pretty much all you can do to the top side of the washing machine right now. So you're just going to pick it up so you can get to the bottom side and take the motor off. But be sure to put something between you and the washing machine in case it does fall over.
Okay, now that we're underneath, we want to twist this. I don't know if you can tell, the light's kind of bright, but that is an Allen bolt. It's actually a number 6. So, we want to do lefty-loosey on this, but we want to make sure we hold this as tight as we can and push it the opposite direction. So, there we go.
Keep turning this thing forever. The magnets to the motor are actually in this cover, so you can twist it all day and it won't force itself off. You just have to pull it off. doing the electrical harness.
I have fat fingers.
Keep in mind, if you have some greasy hands, you don't want to get this motor too dirty.
We got her loose.
Then there are 4 10mm bolts that hold on the motor to the bottom of the washing machine. After you remove the bolts, you can take off the metal spacer, and then you see me here. I'm fixing to rush and put some gloves on because my hands are pretty filthy and I didn't want to get the motor dirty. And in my haste, I got 2 left-handed gloves. But anyways, take the motor off and set it aside where you can't hurt it. And then here I jump the gun a little bit too. I start trying to loosen the nut that holds the drive shaft bearings on, and then the top cover to the motor falls off. So it just sits up there. For this particular job, I think I'm using a 1 5/16" wrench and a 7/8 spline socket. I'm using a spline socket because the bottom of that drive shaft has splines on it, and I don't want to damage it with anything else. So after some convincing, I can finally loosen it by hand and take that nut off of there. There's also a spacer underneath that nut, but it's kind of frozen onto the shaft, so I'm going to leave it there for now. Okay, so now I'm trying to remove the shaft from the bearings. So what I'm going to do is heat up the outside of the bearing, but not the inside of the bearing, because I want the bearing to expand just a little bit, but not the shaft. This way the shaft will come out just a little bit easier. Shaft a few licks from the bottom with a hammer, and as you can see, it starts to come right out. One important note to remember is that the shaft can only come out of the top side, so don't try to hit it out from the bottom, because it definitely won't come out the bottom. So after it's loose from the bearings, it should just slide right out. There you have it. Alright, now that the shaft is out, I'm actually going to use that extension to beat the bottom bearing out from the top side. And 2 hits, it comes right out.
We got the bottom bearing, which came out of that hole. And ooh, it's toast. I cannot turn it by hand. Oh wait, yes I can. Not well. Not well. So, now we want to get the top bearing out. To do that, simply going to repeat the process. Okay, so I was able to find a kit online for $60. Comes with both bearings, a new shaft, comes with sealant and glue and a spacer, and everything was, like I said, $60, so can't beat that deal. So when you're putting bearings in, you always want to make sure that you're pushing in by this outer race here. If you press on this black piece in the middle of this inner race, you're going to trash the bearing while you're putting it in. So, the best thing you can do is get a socket, if you have one, that's the exact size of the bearing. That way you know you're only going to push the outside. Or another thing you do is take the old bearing and match it up with this one. That way you know you can trash the old bearing that's already bad, and that old bearing will definitely push on the outer race of this one if you can't find a socket that's the right size.
So what you see me doing here is I'm taking a torch to heat up the outside of the hole to make that hole expand so the bearing will go in just a little bit easier. Another trick that I did is I let both of my bearings sit in a Ziploc bag in ice water in the freezer for about 30 minutes. So you want the bearings to get cold and shrink, and you want the hole to expand. And then as you'll see here, I mean, 1 or 2 hits and the bearing is almost seats on the first try. So that's a useful trick, and that comes in handy no matter what kind of bearing you're putting in. That rule holds, and if you cool down the bearing and heat up the hole, it'll go in a lot easier. Also keep in mind that there is a special tool for this that we're not using. That tool costs $80, and if you do it this way, you're saving yourself $80 for the price of the tool, because hopefully you don't have to do this job again for the life of your washing machine. And then same deal here, we're going to heat up this bottom bearing, the bottom of the hole, and we're not going to go too crazy with it because as you can see it's surrounded by a bunch of plastic, so you want to get it pretty hot, but you don't want to melt your washing machine either. Then there's a sleeve that goes in between the 2 bearings to keep the spacing correct. Make sure you put that in before you put the bearing on, otherwise you're going to have to take one of them back out. And this bottom bearing is a little bit harder to get on. It's kind of at a tough angle to get to with the washing machine kind of half in the air crooked. Also, you don't have a lot of leverage working on the ground, but it's still not horrible. It goes in pretty easy. The shaft in from the top side just to make sure that both of the bearings are going in correctly. After you slide it in, you're gonna have to give it a few licks with the hammer, just lightly, because you don't want to force that bottom bearing back out. And as you can see, it's coming through really slowly, but it's getting there. After that, I'm gonna take my socket and put the deep side over the shaft so it won't damage the shaft. And now I can hit the bearing a few more times to make sure it's fully seated. And I want to hit it until the threads are exposed on the shaft so I can put the spacer and the nut on. So I've got the spacer on, now I'm putting my nut on, then I'll start torquing it down. And I don't recommend using a pipe wrench like I'm using right now, but at this point in the project I was ready to get done, and I didn't feel like looking for another socket. By hand. If you can't turn it by hand, then something's not lined up right. So when the shaft is on, everything's good to go. You can start installing the motor. So I'm going to put the top cover to the motor, the electric motor on. Then I'm going to put my metal spacer and my 4 10mm bolts in. We're going to go with German torque. That means good and tight. So as tight as you can get it with a quarter-inch ratchet, and it's probably good to go. Same story for that Allen bolt on the bottom of the motor cover, German torque. Okay, this is probably one of the most important parts of putting these bearings on, is you want to make sure the seal is right. There are 2 grooves that run along the inner spring of the seal there. You want to make sure you use plenty of grease on both of them, get it in there. You're also going to want to make sure you put the open side of the bearing, the seal that you see now, face down. And I'm going to put a layer of adhesive before I put on the seal, just in case anything gets past the seal, it won't get into that bearing over time. And don't worry about the adhesive, it's thick like molasses, it's not going to get in that bearing is sealed anyways. So just slide the seal on over the shaft, and it takes some convincing, but it'll go on. Then I'm going to coat the top side of the seal with another layer of that adhesive. And be careful, this stuff is worse than super glue, so if it gets on you, it's going to stay there for a while. And as you can see, it's pretty thick, it stays on there, but this is the only thing protecting your bearings from the water inside the washing machine. Now that you're done with that, you can put your drum back on. Keep in mind, this thing is still pretty heavy, still plenty of water inside of it. Now that you have the tub back in, you can put the coupling back on. I don't recommend using a power tool to put those Phillips head screws back in, but just make sure you get them good and tight. Then you can start putting the agitator back in. The agitator is the big pole in the middle of the washing machine that makes your clothes smell nice and fresh. So the bottom piece just slides on over the hole. And you'll remember when I put the top piece off, I had to use a gator grip socket, but now that I'm putting it on, I know what size it is. It's a 7/16. And also German torque on this, just get it tight, make sure it's not going to come loose. We're going to put our seal back in to make sure water can't get in there. And then lastly, we're going to put the cap back on. And then you just have to put that plastic cover back on the rest of the washing machine, and then you should be ready to go.
Alright, so after you get the lid back on, and the cover back on, this is what you're left with. Look at that spin. So this is what it sounds like on the spin cycle.